I did my unit plan on nutrition and the 5 food groups and how they should relate to each other in proportions and size for every meal. So my unit plan is for the 5th grade, and the subject area would be physical education and health sciences. And the lesson plan I chose as my favorite was my 4th lesson plan, which is called Good Golly, Grains Are Great, and it's about the grains food group. So the general outcome of this lesson would be that students will learn basics about the grains food group, like what foods belong in this group and the different types of grains, like whole grains versus refined grains. And students will actually learn the differences between whole grains and refined grains by learning words like bran, endosperm, and germ. And then they will complete tasks that are going to require them to distinguish between whole grain foods and refined grain foods. And they will have to label the different parts of the grain in one of the activities that I'll show you later. So the lesson objective is, given a quiz on grains, students will correctly answer 7 out of the 10 questions presented on the quiz. And then the IEP objective I wrote was, when completing the Great Grains quiz, John will accurately label all 3 parts of the grain diagram by himself, which I'll show you this diagram later. And then I have the standards listed that would be covered for Sunshine State standards. And then for the opening set, what I say to the students, I say, students, I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're at the grocery store. Your mom asks you to go pick out some bread you would like for your sandwiches this week. You stroll down the bread aisle, but stop dead in your tracks. Suddenly you feel overwhelmed. There are so many breads to choose from. Which do I pick? You think to yourself in a panic. You notice that a few of the products have the words whole grain on the label. What does that even mean? You wonder yourself. What is a grain? What do they mean by whole grain? Are the other breads only part grain breads? And then this would lead to a class discussion where I ask questions like, does anyone know answer to these questions, like what grains are and what the difference between whole grains and refined grain breads are. And then I would explain to the students that today that's what we're going to be going over. And then I would pass out this worksheet right here, which I've created to go along with a video called What Are Grains? So what the students would do, I would explain to them, they're going to watch the video, and as the video goes, they'll fill out the blanks on the quiz or on the assessment, and I will pause the video at the appropriate points to give students time to fill in the answers. And then after watching the video, we would go over the answers as a group, and students can correct the answers. I won't be collecting these, but we will be going over the answers so they can see what they got right and what they got wrong. And then I will tell them to hold on to this because it will help them answer some questions that we're going to do later in the lesson. So after the video, I'm going to pass out different examples of whole grain and refined grain foods to each table group because my students will be sitting in groups of 4 with their desks together. And so examples that I would provide would be like a slice of whole wheat bread, a slice of white bread, a bowl of brown rice, a bowl of white rice, a bowl of white flour, and a bowl of whole wheat flour. And then so I would pass out these examples and then just ask them questions like, can anyone guess which piece of bread is the whole grain bread? And then ask questions like, which of the bowls do you think contains the refined grain flour? And then also ask, which bowls do you think is the healthier option that will provide you with more nutrients for the rice bowls? And then I would say things like, if they did respond with brown rice, they thought that one, I would say, yes, that's correct. It provides us with more nutrients like protein, fiber, and B vitamins. So I'd be making that link back to that video that we watched and the information that was provided in it. And then after we went over those examples, I would ask if one of the students from each group would collect the samples from their table and bring them back to the front and set them up there so that the kids won't be distracted by those samples or possibly make a mess from them for the remainder of the lesson. And then after we get done going over those examples, I would pass out a take it or leave it good and bad green file folder game, which I showed in my file folder peer presentation. And I would tell the students, as a group, I would like you to complete the following activity. The directions are located in the envelope on the back of the folder. Work together to decide which side the food should go on. Keep in mind what we have learned about whole and refined grains. If you get stuck, refer back to your video worksheet. If you are still confused, raise your hand and I will come guide you. You have 10 minutes to complete this activity. And as students complete the activity, I would just walk around the room and sort of just observe and see if students are getting the information that we're going over, and then also answer any questions that they have and then also check the work as they go through. And then if any group finishes before everyone else does, what I would tell them to do is I will hand them this coloring worksheet right here, which shows the different parts of the grains, which we went over in the initial video. And then they would just have to color in these parts of the grains. And then it has a little statement right here saying whole grains contain many healthy things, especially fiber, since most of the healthy things that are found in the germ and bran foods made with the entire kernel can play an important role in having good health. So this just kind of reinforces the idea of whole grain foods being better than refined grain foods. And it's a fun way for them to still learn, but also get to color at the same time. All right, and then after every group has completed the file folder game, and I've checked all of them for accuracy to see how they're understanding the concept so far, I will collect the folders and then tell the students to put away all of their materials except for just a pencil. And I would pass out a copy of the Great Grains quiz, which I have created right here. And then I would say to the students, you will be taking a short quiz going over what we have learned about whole and refined grains. This is an individual assignment, so please work alone. You will have 20 minutes to complete this quiz. If you get stuck on a question, skip it and go back to it later. Think about the video we watched about grains and the examples of refined and whole grains we looked at earlier. You may begin. And then I would set a timer on the Elmo projector for 20 minutes so that students can manage their time well and see how much time they have left. So this is the quiz right here. It's probably backwards, sorry. But so the first part, they have to correctly label the different parts of the grain. So it'd be like bran, endosperm, and then germ right there. And then there's different multiple choice questions like the two types of grains are, and then they have a couple of different answer options, and then which of the following was not an example of a whole grain, and I listed wheats, oats, flakes, barley, and rice, so the correct answer would be flakes. And then I have an answer key right over here that just goes through and sort of fills in the blanks and highlights all the correct answers. And then this little diagram right here is actually the part that was mentioned in my IEP objective that the student John would have to correctly fill in all three of those without any assistance. That's his objective for the lesson. Okay, and so after I would remind the students at 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute how much time they have left. And then after the time has finished, I'll tell the students to get another colored pen and they'll be grading their own worksheet as they go. We're running on the honor system here. And then I'll go through each question and read it and then go through every answer choice and then explain why the correct answer is the best option. And then I will ask students to write the number of answers they got right at the top of their papers and pass them up to the front of the class. And then I'll end the lesson by saying, now that you have a better understanding of the types of grains, I hope you will all make the decision to eat more whole grain foods. These foods will help you develop and grow up to be smart, strong individuals. When you get home today, ask your parents if they will start buying you whole grain bread and other whole grain products if they do not already. Tomorrow is the final day of our unit on nutrition and the food groups. We will be learning about something called My Plate, which involves all 5 of the food groups we have learned about. Can anyone name all 5 of the food groups for me? I do this as a review to kind of make sure we're still grasping all the information we've gone over so far because it is a lot of information. So I would pause and call on a student that raised their hand and then respond appropriately if they listed all of the correct food groups. And so evaluation of objectives is formative, going around engaging student understanding with questions and stuff. And then summative was through the Great Grains quiz. So although these were self-graded, I can easily monitor the students from the front of the classroom as I'm going over. And if I see any students erasing their answers or changing their answers or anything like that, I can make a little side note on a piece of paper next to me so that whenever I'm looking at how many they got right, I can actually have a better understanding of how many they actually got right. And then the materials listed are just all the different worksheets and the file folder games, the colored pencils for them to color the worksheet, and then paper plates and paper bowls to put the example flours and rice and bread on. And then modifications I made. So for the file folder game, there was a modification included for the one that I used. It was a picture key that shows each of the food pieces that are part of the game, and then has a picture key for it saying what the food is if the student was unaware of what that food was. And then some other modifications for ESOL students were students will be provided with an English to Spanish translation sheet of the more difficult new words learned in the lesson, like endosperm, fiber, and bran. They can use this during the independent practice and throughout the entire lesson. And then they can actually opt to take the quiz I created in their first language. And if they opt to not take it in their first language and to take it in English, they'll be given additional time on that quiz. And then modifications for varying abilities, they can use the picture key provided in the file folder game that they will be completing. And then students will be provided with scripts of the video watched in class, which I have right here. This is the script of the video watched in class. And then students can also be provided with a word bank to choose words from to fill in the blanks on the video worksheet that I showed at the beginning. So I would just provide them with a little word bank on the side for them to fill in. And then they will also be given additional time to complete the independent practice assessment, the Great Brains quiz. And then as far as technology, I will use an Elmo projector to go over the answers to the video worksheet and the quiz assessment, and then also the use of an Apple TV to control the video and pause it in the places for the students to fill in the blanks, so I don't have to be standing over at the desk to pause the video in the appropriate places. I can be across the room kind of watching and observing students to make sure they're paying attention, filling out the right things, and see if anyone has any questions. I can just pause it with the click of a button. And then also the presentation of multiple videos to enhance the information being relayed to the students. So yeah, that was my favorite lesson plan, was my lesson on the Great Brains.